Я думаю, в самое-самое ближайшее время мы начнем.
Everyone, good evening, and let's begin our session here. Let me introduce our participants of the discussion. Let me introduce myself, Aleksey Fedorov. I'm the head of the Russian Quantum Center. Our session is a very high profile in financial sector of the quantum technologies, and the quantum disrupt is the title of this session. Let's come to common mutual understanding what it is all about. And I think that the strongest and the most the people who have the biggest stamina have remained in this audience. Everybody else is just modest and bashful. We're still waiting for one important guest, and let's wait for the person to come and join us, and let's then begin our session. Let's give it just 1 minute, and we'll begin shortly. Believe me, everything that we know we'll be able to share with you. The central bank is holding people back from quantum technologies discussion. Well, generally, what's the idea when people talk about quantum technology? Maybe Schrödinger's cat comes up to mind. Lasers and semiconductors is the correct answer, because this is about the answer to that comes back from the first quantum revolution. But we're on the threshold, because looking at the panel discussion members here, we probably already passed this threshold of the second quantum revolution, and it's not about to begin, but it has already begun. Aleksey, I think we need to begin, otherwise we'll lag behind. When we talk about quantum physics, the general idea is about something really small particles, but to those small particles a lot of attention is attached. Quantum particles attract a lot of attention and huge investments. Small quantum particles can solve really big tasks. What kind of tasks can they solve? What are the prospects in Russia and over the world? And we have a very unique panel discussion. Let me introduce them. Mr. Sergey, Kulik, Scientific Director of the Center for Quantum Technologies, Moscow State University. Vladimir, Eliseev, the Chief of Research and Development, Center InfoTeCS Company. Yuri Kurochkin, the Founder and Chief Technical Officer of QRate. Sergey Khanenkov, Project Director of Rostelecom. Sergey Moiseev, the Director of Kazan Quantum Center, and the Vice Deputy Chairman of the Management Board of Gazprombank, Dmitry Zauers. As you see, quantum technologies are being discussed among the scholars and business representatives and first clients and those who try the quantum technologies. And we'll begin by figuring it out, what the quantum technologies are for. And let's give this first speech to Mr. Kulik. What should we expect from this technology in the future? Please put my presentation on. Thank you for coming so late. If we think that we will be able to sort things out, then it is a wrong idea. We'll be able to only scratch the surface. There are three whales, and we have very little time. So quantum mechanics connected to the technologies used to build a quantum computer. Quantum communication is something that related to protected networks. Generally, I will not read the rest because it's just taking time. It's about the sub-technologies development. Quantum sensorics building more sensitive sensors based on the quantum technology. The main difference between the modern quantum technologies and the historical ones is that the world and scholars who run experiments, they working with individual quantum particles like photon, molecule, or atom, something that didn't even exist in the 20th century, because the products of the quantum mechanics among those products is the bomb that exploded. It's not about particles individually, it's lasers and a whole bunch of devices that surround us in everyday life. The main particularity of these quantum technologies is permeating technology, and the main difference is that scientific components of this technology is very high, is very important, and we cannot talk yet about direct commercialization of this, but quantum technology already produces products to sell for sale in the market. So quantum calculations are gaining momentum. Quantum communications are developing, and there are commercially available devices, and quantum sensoric technology is under development. The specifics, before I go into the second part of my presentation, the second specifics in this activity is financially, is that it's a very it takes a lot of resources, a lot of money, and scientists need and want more money for research work by tries and fails, and by using a very expensive equipment. But the state or state corporations and private corporations that invest that money, they are interested in return, in a financial return. So there is a collision happening, because there is a gap between what scientists want and what investors want. So we are trying to actually strike a balance here. Next slide. Since I have very little time, I'll just talk shortly about the organization that I represent. It's the Moscow State University. We created a quantum research center. So we work on quantum technologies and run researches and sensors. The slogan that we came up with recently is to create a shortcut. Maybe it's a wild thought to create a shortcut from science to a product within a very short span of time. One of those products that we have created is with a very stable financial partner, and Vladimir Eliseev, who represents InfoTeCS here, he will be talking about that a little more detail, and they, along with us, helped us in coming to the final implementation of the product. I attended the previous session about financial literacy, and this session is dedicated to a topic that has very few literate people. And when we talk about quantum technologies, if you don't figure it out, it's impossible to learn this topic in a short while. There is no shortcuts there. So being a Bachelor of Science or a Master of Science is required. So it's a very tough road to take. What has been done, and we're not alone in this field, we have a few teams in Russia in the educational area, for students of offline and online students, distant courses, and so forth. All of that is being worked on. I'm an optimist in life, and I believe that what I have tried to convey to you is real and will be integrated, and there will be products based on the technical and scientific research. Thank you very much. As we have understood, quantum technologies have a big part that comes from science, and we'll come to the quantum communication, which is the closest to the market. It's not only an answer to the threat of data, safety, and so forth. And Vladimir, your company has some experience in protecting information. And what use is it for the business? What protection does it provide for the information? What products do you have available? Thank you for the introduction, Aleksey. I must say that in spite of the fact that quantum mechanics and these basic technologies that Sergey Kulik has mentioned, they are very complex for mundane understanding. When we talk about issuing products into the market, in order to utilize those products, it doesn't take too deep of a knowledge in the principle, the other principles underneath those processes. Not many of us know the principle of work of a transistor, radio transistor, but nonetheless, many of us radio enthusiasts have used the transistors for creating circuits. The first product that we made available with the Moscow State University Quantum Research Center is a very easy to understand device, 10 gigabyte bit encryptor that ensures communication between centers of data processing with tens of or hundreds of kilometers apart. So there is nothing unclear for those who are here. But there is specifics. The keys are for encryption. They come from the quantum equipment. When we talk about quantum cryptography, we're talking about the quantum distribution of keys of encryption. This technology deals with secret development of cryptic keys. And the majority of products in the world work following this logic. You have points of access, and which generate those cryptic keys and consumed by the decryptic device. But the distance between those devices is usually limited down to 100 kilometers. And that's why we see the future of building and upscaling quantum networks, because point-to-point networks is very narrow. For city quantum networks, much more economically viable scheme would be a star-like network with, and there are rays. There is a center of the star, and there are rays coming from that center that coordinate their communication among themselves. And the second work that we work on is the quantum security system, a system of optical commutators that covers mega cities like Moscow very easily. And the number of stations in such a network, quantum can scale up to 800. So this is the first generation of such a product. The main thing is that this product is innovational in its nature, and as well as in typology, and out-of-the-box products in the world that we are not aware of in the world. Just pay attention to the fact that there is a picture of an actual product in the slide, and the black color box is the cheapest element there is that will be upscaled by 100, produced by hundreds. In the main two scenarios that we're considering for this device at the first stage of its integration is the implementation of the protected communication, non-compromisable for the highest authorities, because even the system administrator is not aware of the cryptic keys generated by the system.
No one can intercept that kind of key. The second pilot usage of that will be interesting for banks. You can organize the delivery of this protected secret to ATMs. Thus, we immediately deal with the problem of upgrading ATM's keys without sending the experts to the ATM, because you can encrypt it on the one-off basis. The productivity of that system allows us to do that. What kind of advantages does this technology have compared with the traditional one? There are three main aspects. Number one, quantum distribution of keys protects us from all sorts of attacks, including from a risk of getting counterfeit quantum computers. And there are also risks for internal perpetrators. And there was this rumor recently that the personal data of clients of a big bank have almost been disclosed, and it shows us that we can deal with such situations using the technology. The keys encrypting this information, they are not known to anyone, even to the hardware, when they are generated, and the technology is ripe. It is in line with the current development of the today's communication devices. It's working at the ambient temperature. It's the technology that we can use today. And the prerequisites for using that is a combination of three factors. It's the encryptor's production technology, it's the technology to prove its cryptic resistance, and the quantum physics that we're not going to touch upon in this audience. Quantum communications are a new way of protecting data that in the future will allow us to defend ourselves from the dark sides of quantum computers. Quantum computers have lots of positive features. There are computational tasks that they can deal with. Is that at the same time there's a dark side to it when it can hack all those quantum defense systems. Yuri, you had a different journey. You were trying to get to the information security market in a different way. This was a really fast journey. What kind of approaches have you used? And most of your experiments took place in the financial industry to protect the data of banks. Tell us about quantum communication efforts from startups. Thank you very much for such a warm introduction. Let me tell you about our QRate startup. It was started among the members of the academia. It was started by scientists. Let me talk a little bit about physics. What's happening? A startup, when you set up a startup, it is based on some pain that the client might have on their need. We already have encryptors and structure to protect your information in which you have to upgrade your keys. You can upgrade those keys by sending a courier. Unfortunately, the physical world is such that you can peep into the case of a courier, and it turns out that the ideal courier is this kind of elementary particle, a single photon, as opposed to the actual physical case. If we look at the bit of information carried by the single photon, we will change this photon. It's not the limitation of the interceptor, it's the fundamental law of physics. That's how the quantum distribution of keys works. We can send the keys by single photons and then check whether there was an attempt to intercept it or not. That's a very interesting fundamental and applied task. We have decided to come up with a competitive product which would be competitive in the international market. Now we're sure we were successful. We started in 2015, and in 2016 we were able to show our first prototype together with Gazprombank between their two offices in Moscow. Then we had new tests and trials together with Sberbank, with Rostelecom. Each new test gave us some new experience. We improved the results, and now we are moving towards serial production and are ready to deploy networks. Why is it important to work on quantum networks? Why is there so much written about it in the roadmaps of digital economy? This is a new technology, and it's part of our infrastructure. When you distribute the keys, currently it's available to individual banks through their data processing centers. But when we build a network between Moscow and St. Petersburg, when we build in-city networks, it will allow us to make this service affordable and accessible, will allow us to attract developers of top-level applications that will be making new applications using quantum keys, thus giving more and more incentives to the market. That's how our strategy works. And the logic is based on three areas. Quantum keys can be used not only to protect the data in transfer or in transit, the payment documents in banks, or also for authentication to protect the critical infrastructure. When we build smart grids, when we work on smart railways, we want that entire system to be well protected, encrypted, and the quantum keys allow us to protect those systems from new threats and old threats and the quantum computers. And when you have to protect distributed storage of data, that's another interesting area, which is one of many applications and quantum blockchain that could be generated using quantum keys. Please get involved in that industry, be part of it, and use your energy to develop this market. Thank you, Yuri. I can give rounds of applause to every speaker, and we'll also give all of them a round of applause at the end. Sergey, you work with all manufacturers of quantum communications. You're trying to use your photon courier for many applications. What about the role of Rostelecom in the development of quantum communications and networks? You interact with all these developers, but will you be able to offer any services to business? What will these services give to business? Good evening, dear colleagues. We have been working on quantum communications for 2 years now. The strategic goal there is to come up with a system of managing quantum networks and providing services on that basis. And please help me with my presentation. One of the first tasks of the project is to test some of the pilot equipment of quantum distribution of keys so that we could make sure that it can work within the network of communications telecom operators. Here are some of the maps showing us the geography of our project. We have built this test bench, a line of 158 kilometers with where we were able to test three quantum key manufacturers' generators from QRate, SysMore, and InfoTeCS equipment, which was created together with the Moscow State University Quantum Center. We looked at how it works on real line, and we decided that we know it's ready to be launched. And there are a number of problems that we will have to deal with and that we will have to work on. And of course, currently this equipment has not been certified. And we expected the first such device to be certified by the regulator this year. It won't happen. That's a factor that delays the whole thing. But when we looked at the situation, we have this point-to-point equipment that works. What kind of services can we offer on that basis? And in the spring, we offered a prototype of the service for data communication channel between our two data centers in Moscow, M9 and M10. They were all integrated into our cloud platform. And such prototype has shown that we can offer such services in the future. But how do we build those networks? We have point-to-point equipment, and how? Let's try to build the simplest multi-node network in St. Petersburg. During the St. Petersburg Economic Forum in summer, we have shown first multi-mode, multi-vendor quantum network in Russia. QRate was part of it, and Etmo University. And we realized that we could be building networks with, of course, with certain limitations, with some intermediate nodes. And since these are mainline networks, quite lengthy, our average length of the span is about 100 kilometers between nodes of access in Kazan. We recently experimented with how long, with the distance of how long you can send it. They started with 200 kilometers, then 160. It ended up with 143, and that's the number we have in our heads, and that's what we use in practice. There has been, if someone tells you about 400 or 500 kilometers, with telecom it's 143 kilometers. Okay, we tested them all, and now we were able to move on to some practical steps. And this is what we came up with. It's a project of distributing quantum keys between our data processing centers in Moscow and a similar network in Udomlya, together with Rostelecom. This is the biggest data processing center in Russia with 4,800 racks, and we are going to be using services on that basis for corporate and government clients. Its length, the length of the network is over 600 kilometers with several intermediate nodes, and we are going to use the key as the service when we distribute the encryption key in the quantum way between the encryptors and the processing centers in Moscow. On top of that, we have additional services. We have similar services now as we protect our data channels in the regular way, and the optic lambda channels could covered by using these quantum keys. What else is interesting? On September the 16th, the EU announced a similar project. Great minds think alike, and 30 countries are involved into that project. They have more intermediary nodes, 18 million euro of financing, including 15 million euro, which is the grant of the European Union, and that's our competitor, almost like a twin. Currently, we have the infrastructure ready for this project, and the specifications, the terms of reference have been prepared It's being approved, and these quantum technologies are quite expensive. The most expensive part of this project is quantum equipment. There are some commercial issues. You cannot resolve them with Rostelecom investments alone. That's why we're looking for the support from the government, so the government would be able to help us to finance all this equipment. We were trying to optimize the project, and if we look at the specific indicators, the number of ports and number of nodes, the European project confirms that. You might think it was a conspiracy of the manufacturers. No, it's not true. It costs about the same in the European project.
So this project will be launched in 2 years' time. Many people ask us when it will be launched. In the cities, there will be photonic hubs, exchange hubs, internet exchange, photon-based hubs, and there will be suppliers of quantum effects, and photons will be on sale. And in order to do that, in order to create a device, a unit that would be independent in generation of keys, it's important to have those photon hubs in the cities. And the second important thing that will concern many of us, the miniaturization of chips that are integrated in our smartphones that will require quantum protection, and including financial transaction protection, and these keys will be generated to transfer data, and depending on the volume of the data, using quantum channels with the keys. In general, when we talk about quantum technologies, just imagine a huge cloud of hype around this topic, and the other hand, as big a cloud of hopes. So I believe that such is the future for quantum technologies. So you have been able to actually formulate some terms of reference for photon hubs. One of the problems that the quantum technologies face is distance, because some of the data and signal is being lost along the way. So the principle of building another next generation of quantum transmitters, such as repeaters or steppers. Tell us, please, about the quantum repeaters as technology of prolonging or expanding the distance. Thank you for the opportunity to share about quantum memory. I have been in this research for over 18 years. It's a big period of time, long period of time, and there comes a time when this information or this research is currently becoming a reality, and I just have this feeling that this meeting is different, because people used to talk about quantum technologies and nobody believed that it would become possible. But nowadays, it has become, been moving, and in terms of companies, and there are plans that people have for the future, and the world has changed in reality. So, we already live amongst these technologies, and photons and atoms and molecules have become our friends. I just couldn't help but saying these words. All of us understand that it's not only about computers and mobile devices, but photons and atoms should become our friends. Quantum communications have become a priority of discussion in One of the speakers said that it still has a lot of science behind it, and there's things to be done. In order to protect quantum communication, it is important to understand that quantum technologies will allow everybody to encrypt and protect their data. So it's kind of a democracy for everyone. But we need networks for that. So in this image, on this image in the slide, we show existing and even outdated by 2 years or even 3 years quantum highways in China, in America, and in Russia. That's the project that are being underway. And in China, for example, the quantum highway is 5,000 kilometers, but it is subdivided into sectors of 50 kilometers because photons are being lost along the way, and photons are our friends, which are being lost, and optical fibers allow us to expand by the distance by 100 kilometers. The minimal distance in Russia is 140, 150 kilometers. We need to come up and develop our own quantum communication ways. On the one hand, maybe we should consider bigger distances, like 1,000 kilometers. On the other hand, there is a solution as quantum repeaters to subdivide the distance into 100-kilometer sectors. And 21 years ago, there was a project launched involving quantum repeaters, and at the bottom of this slide you see the network of long lines and individual cubes or devices where there's a collection of quantum effects. So the quantum memory needs to be there. There are certain requirements for that. And before I go into the topic, discussing the topic of quantum repeaters, it's not only about quantum memory, because we understand fully well that we need communications for quantum memory. In the countries vast. In Japan, for example, there are several R&D centers which develop quantum repeaters for communication, and we took the system that was developed in St. Petersburg as a basis, and we worked on it a little bit, and we managed to come up with, along with Tataria, Rostelecom, and Rostelecom, Russian to the Rostelecom. So we set a world record in length. So there is no longer line than this. Rostelecom is working, has worked really hard to test this, and the system is stable. We began specializing in long distances, and in-city networks are very important, and we're probably taking the niche of long distances between the cities. And we can only transfer 1 key per minute. It is, if we add 50 kilometers, it adds time by 1 hour. So generating a key during 1 hour is too long. That's why we cannot do without quantum repeaters. We need a good memory. Please turn on the next slide. I drew a map of so we have optic fibers that is used to send a photon, but it doesn't actually help too much. In order to have a good quantum repeater, we have such requirements met, so that the quantum efficiency would be over 90%, lifetime would be less, over 1 millisecond, so that 10 photons would stay alive to reach the next repeater. So these are the minimum requirements. That's where we should go from. So we are pretty close nowadays to the solution, and there is a race happening for the creation of a quantum repeater. There were forecasts that it would be done in 5 or 10 years, and one of the leaders in quantum technology development and the founder of the Russian Quantum Center that is being closely worked with, and he was a co-founder of Kazan Quantum Center. We are also trying to create and develop our quantum memory. We're somewhere in the middle of that map, and we believe that we can do 60% of those, reach the 60% of those minimal requirements. But there is a chance to make a good repeater in the foreseeable future. Of course, forecasts are not exact, but maybe in 10 years, maybe I think that it'll happen much sooner than that. Let's show us the next slide. I'd like to draw to a close in my presentation that currently we have all the necessary results to create quantum memory, but it's not for a single device. So the effectiveness of life cycle of a photon, the distance traveled, and all of those elements bring us to the consideration of maybe it's time to create make a repeater. A company called Smarts referred to us recently that is ready to invest 30 million rubles to make a prototype of a repeater in 2 years' time. It's very promising. It sounds very positive, and we're expecting to see a new prototype of a repeater, quantum repeater, in 2 years. Dmitry, I'd like to give you the floor, and you have been friends with atoms and photons for many years, and thanks to the support by the bank, you have remained afloat. But you not only began in science, but you believe in technology, and thanks to your being familiar with the equipment, you are the one to tell us what is necessary to be done by developers so that they could draw investments, so that it would be of interest to businesses. Thank you, Aleksey. Good evening, dear colleagues. Firstly, when I looked at the list of participants, and I thought that our audience would be very surprised, because out of 7 people on the panel, most people are representing financial sector. I could have thought that maybe the banks are not doing a very good job, but Alpha Bank, for example, it's supporting very important scientific researches. And Yuri has mentioned their participation and our participation as one of the major stakeholders in the developing of a startup to drive to a commercial success. Gazprombank and other banks as well, and their participation are the prospect consumers of these technologies and services, and their consumption is related closely and historically to the responsibility to maintain the money mass, the cash, and protect it. We can joke about it. We can, and my colleagues are asking me whether we should go into the digital fully 100%, but if we have a choice between the safety of your money and a good digital service, what would you choose? And the answer is obvious, in my opinion. Everybody wants their money safe. It's not because the digital services are not good enough. So the function of the bank to keep money secure should lead us in thinking of developing those technologies in order to sustain and resist cyber attacks and threats. And it's not only good or high or low levels of protection in view of the fact of the availability of technical means that can be used for protection, and it's for that reason that the being immersed in the particularities of quantum mechanics protection. My colleagues have shared enough on that topic, So we already have a big scientific portfolio, but we still desire the financial data and personal data and other types of data, oftentimes connected to the state services and military information or commercial information, should be protected so that they will be completely unhackable. And that's the reason why we see a huge potential in the commercialization of this technology in quantum communications, because we are the closest to the results that our colleagues have achieved working in parallel, and the current cost of those devices and hubs is not very high. To be able to provide that financial data protection and in order to provide transmission of encrypted keys from one data processing center to another. So in a few years' time, this technology will be updated to the necessary level in order to protect such services, such units as ATM machines. If we talk about what requirements are necessary on behalf of previewed by the business, it's very important as a target to foresee protection of all communications happening between banks and other organizations and clients. And it involves infrastructural changes. And let's ask our colleagues about the other possible horizons or other obstacles that are in their way. But these are things to think about. To protect, the goal is to protect communication on each mobile device. But for now, it would be too spendy, too expensive, and each one of us would agree that nobody would like to admit the thought that somebody would be reading their personal messages on emails or in WhatsApp. But the quantum physics is an available technology to provide that kind of protection individually. And if you, as representatives of technological companies, taking a technological leap and using fiber technologies and other transmission ways, so the target function that will be necessary not only for the banks but for all participants of digital economy is very important. Talking about more practical things, it's obvious that Chinese have their projects and we have our own projects, and we managed to achieve a level of protection while telephone calls with a bank that was demonstrated during the St. Petersburg Financial Economic Forum as a part of an experiment with creating a video session which was protected by quantum technologies. Then we should move forward to the payment services. Payment services is a lot. It takes a lot lighter internet traffic or connection traffic, and it will be impossible to hack using quantum technology protection.
Of course, there is a problem, or rather a task, to certify this technology. Today, the banking community is the first client for this kind of technology. We want our clients to be absolutely sure that their data are protected 100%. I think if you give me a chance to ask a question, they all avoided the topic of a quantum computer, perhaps where too far from it in Russia, but if we could cover this topic a little bit, that would be great. But let me ask our developers of quantum communication systems. We have learned about repeaters. They are to be expected in a few years, but what about quantum cryptography for mobile phones? When will we be able to use this technology for our mobile devices? There are no problems with using quantum distribution of keys for a terminal, and I saw some articles about some prototypes. The scientists are working on such compact systems, but you have to realize that such a device will harmonize the quantum key with another device which is at a certain limited distance. We cannot choose a subscriber online to protect, like communication in WhatsApp is done. We don't know where it's done, but it's used by symmetric cryptography. With quantum keys, we will have to come up with a chain of repeaters. That's one promising technology, and the technology today is the chain of trusted nodes. And the quantum distribution of keys will eventually reach the subscribers' terminals, but we will have to use first generation in a more classical way between data processing centers, and when they introduce quantum networks, the next generation will be quite compact. When we can talk about that in about 4 years. What about, Yuri, what about you? I totally agree with that assessment. Within 2 or 3 years, it won't be a final phone. It will be something relatively small, but not a cell phone yet. And 2 or 3 years later, they will be added to a real consumer device. And we have the current status of the technology. We have the mechanism of making things smaller on the one hand. On the other hand, we have some scientific solutions that can speed up this process, new algorithms and protocols that are adjusted to make things smaller. I agree with that prediction. In 4 or 5 years, we will see quantum encryption in mobile phones. Sergey. About the mobile phone, there was this interesting conference in China, an international conference. In one of the presentations by a Chinese, they said that this year they will have 2 smartphone models with quantum protected keys, not purely quantum keys, but they already have 2 models at least like that. The real disruption will be done by a quantum computer. A lot has been said about it. Private companies, governments, all invest into that kind of quantum labs. They're working on quantum computers. There are other ambitions in Russia, and there is a roadmap. There's a strategy of getting there. You may have heard in the news how Google announced the quantum supremacy, that the quantum problem was solved on the quantum computer that cannot be solved in reasonable time on a classical computer. You are working on quantum computers. Could you comment on that? When can we expect a quantum computer here in Russia that can do it much better than a classical one? We all understand when big private companies invest a lot of money into a kind of into a project like quantum computer, like Google, IBM do it. The scientists are sort of hooked to this addiction. They have to produce some result. If they don't show the result, there'll be no financing. So we are a bit skeptical about those announcements by different companies. And as many of us, we were able to figure out some details. It is a crucial event. It looks like they did implement that kind of algorithm. It works much quicker than the classical analogs. No one needs, of course, this algorithm in the form, in the way that it was presented. It's a crucial, most important event. In Russia, there are some major projects financed by the government with about $1 billion worth of financing, and there are 3 or 4 physical models that we have in mind. Superconductive qubits, different kinds of atoms and neutrons and traps, and these are the areas where we are focusing, and this is a large project. If we don't do it, it's bad, to put it mildly. It's about 50 qubit processor. It's slightly below than that borderline that, according to some estimates, is the supremacy borderline. You need about 100 logical qubits, maybe some exotic protocols similar to Google's, up to 52 qubits. I'm an optimist, but I will not be making that kind of predictions. This quantum supremacy border has been crossed, right? Right. And there are several teams in Russia competing in that area. What about international market? We are willing to test some pilot projects in Russia. Since we have so many teams and we are strong in quantum technology, should we be thinking about international markets and ambitions? Let me try to take that. On the one hand, we had an excellent background, and we have all these teams have excellent results and products, but at the same time, we have to be thinking about the international landscape, and it's about trust. I'm not going to talk about all marketplace, but our strategy is based on the following. Currently, there's this window of opportunities, and we can find international partners. We can commercialize our products internationally using IP principles. And a joint venture in this case is much better than an exclusively Russian company trying to promote IT security in the European market. We do have a strategy. We understand which way to go and get ready for our success. Let me tell you about our strategy of getting into the international markets. InfoTeCS is a license of FSB, and we produce FSB encrypted, FSB certified encryptors, and they cannot be sold abroad, of course, without a special permission from the Russian Security Service, FSB, and we will be going to the international market when the regulator allows us to do that. And the regulator is really interested in the kind of devices that we all hope to present as friends and competitors, and only after that the regulator will be able to make a decision whether they allow us to offer it abroad. Some we only think about the Russian market, but of course we have ambitions to supply to friendly countries. Let me add some more ideas. What's the difference between quantum encryption from the classical one? There are mathematical proofs of unconditional secrecy, when we make some assumptions, and then the reliability of that equipment depends on, number one, the protocols that are used there, and they're open, they're not secret, and B, on the quality of engineering implementation. It is a technology for the rest of the world. It's an international technology. The ambition is the right word here. We have the quantum technology roadmap here in Russia. It already includes some ambitious tasks for the next 5 years. We already know what is going to be invented in 5 years, but quantum physics and quantum technologies are the area where Russian scientists are traditionally strong. The strongest international diaspora are Russians, and many fundamental discoveries in that area were made in Russia. The quantum tech is our chance in history, something that we already do as manufacturers to come up with a brand new market, like what happened 60 years ago around IT technology industry. Let me give you a chance, an opportunity for some final comments. The superposition phenomenon in quantum physics, the alternative events form so-called superposition. The bit can be 0 and 1 at the same time. So let's talk about coherent superposition of something ambitious and interesting. You all will get a chance to make some final comments. We need to keep working. We need to keep working on it, and that's what we're doing. Let's not be afraid of quantum distribution of keys. This technology may sound complicated, but it's ready, and you can get to learn about it. Coherence is one idea in optics. You can talk about coherence of thinking when we all speak the same language, when we all understand what's happening and where we're going, and such events are important in that sense. Because we share our knowledge, it's important for us to hear the demands of the market that we can respond to. If you're interested to continue this debate and what's going to happen, let me use this opportunity to announce this. Rostelecom, together with InfoTeCS and FIPS, studied the patent landscape in quantum technologies. We're going to present it at Open Innovations on the 23rd of October in Moscow, Skolkovo at 3 p.m. You're all invited if you're going to attend the Open Innovations Forum. Do visit that session. We're going to present the key insights and give you some recommendations about what to do about that. Russia is number 12 in terms of the number of patents. Dozens, only very few. We are going to give you all the information that you need. Please do visit our session. Recently, we applied for 5 patents, 4 on quantum communications, 1 on quantum memory, and we are preparing another patent. It's just the top of the iceberg, and quantum mechanics is full of surprises. Now it works in the IT world, and that's just the tip of the iceberg, and we will learn lots of other facts during our next meetings, and you're also invited. Thank you. I began to ask people about the quantum computer. If we talk about encryption and communication, competition is great. It's good that there are several startups and they compete. When we talk about quantum computers, I'm convinced that alone, none of the companies or institutions or any scientific groups are able to deal with this task. All of us together need to unite our efforts, and we don't need to try to compete in it. This is my opinion based on how the roadmap is being implemented. We do need to unite our efforts. The competition is strong, Russia is a little bit behind in computations, but it's not behind in the kind of brains that we have. Let's not lose this race as we lost it in microelectronics. And good luck to all of us, and let's all be optimistic about such opportunities. I'd like to thank all of those present for their attention. Thank you.